Okay, hello, my name is Melinda Knuth. I am the Violence Prevention Coordinator at Public Health Madison and Dane County. I'm reminding myself to take some time and let everybody have time to start logging in. People need to get situated, get their food, whatever you might be doing while you're listening to this. So I'm talking very slowly right now so people can start logging in. But I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your busy evening to be here as part of the conversation with the folks that we have here from RCC GameChangers. It's gorgeous outside, so I hope that there might be some of you that are listening to this while taking a walk or sitting in the grass or maybe eating your dinner outside, whatever you might be doing. Like I said already once, but people are still logging in. My name is Melinda Knuth, and I am the Violence Prevention Coordinator at Public Health Madison and Dane County. And I wanted to go over just a little bit of how the format's going to work and some little just informational items before we begin. First, I wanted to let everybody know that this webinar will be conducted as a conversation between myself and our guests. We will monitor the Q&A. We just found out as we were logging in that the chat was turned off and I don't have the controls. So I'm very hopeful that the Q&A is working. And if anybody feels like they want to test that out and put something in the Q&A, feel free to do that. We'll do our best to be monitoring that and answering any questions in real time or addressing any conversations that people or things people would like to ask during the real time. I also wanted to recognize the fact that many of the topics that could come up during this conversation could be difficult or triggering and for some people coming into this space, and that we encourage you to take care of yourselves, step away at any point that you need to. So at Public Health, we are using a public health approach to violence prevention. Embedded in our core values is a commitment to health and racial equity. We recognize that health and safety outcomes are largely the products of inequitable social, economic, and environmental systems over time. As our guests are apt to point out, if you are not approaching sexual violence and the prevention of sexual violence with a focus on intersectionality, you're not actually doing the work. I am so excited to have this conversation with folks from GameChangers this evening. For those of you in the Madison-Dane County area, you are probably familiar with RCC. RCC has been serving survivors of sexual assault for 50 years. They are celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. They've been committed to this work since 1973. For many of those years, the work has been primarily focused on advocacy for survivors of sexual assault. Over the past several years, they've been able to further expand their work into the areas of prevention. And they've also engaged in very intentional work to recognize how race, gender, sexuality, and other factors differently impact survivors. GameChangers is an excellent example of a program that has come from these efforts. The other very important reason I wanted to highlight GameChangers is because this program is truly youth developed and led. There are many of us working in various fields that have a strong interest in engaging young people and including them in all parts of the work that impacts them, from planning through implementation and evaluation. But we're not always doing it. So I'm hoping this conversation will help you in your work to really do this with honesty, curiosity, and intention. So the RCC GameChangers is a team of high school students from across Dane County who are committed to engaging in activism and advocacy while educating themselves in our community on rape culture and other intersecting oppressions that affect survivors of sexual violence. GameChanger students are paid for their important work and serve as representatives of RCC and help inform how the outreach and education team engages with students in the community that they serve. With us tonight from RCC GameChangers, we have RCC GameChanger Coordinator Heather Chun, and we also have 4 GameChanger student facilitators, Makeda, Azalea, Olivia, and Dimitri, who goes by the name Trey. I'm going to turn things over to Heather to further allow them to introduce themselves.
Thank you so much, Melinda. I really appreciate it. And appreciate folks who watch this and learn from our students. So I am Heather Chun. My pronouns are they, them. And I am the prevention coordinator, which also looks like the Game Changers coordinator at the RCC Sexual Violence Resource Center. We recently changed our name just to encompass a little bit more of what we do, and to also use more affirming and hopefully less triggering words for folks who want to seek our services. So I just want to give a little bit of context about Game Changers. Melinda did a wonderful job. Thank you so much for that lovely intro, Queen. Appreciate it. But kind of info I wanted to add is that Game Changers is really about kind of training and giving tools to our kind of current generation of activists and advocates, specifically in the youth area, because we know that youth are the experts in their experience and can give adults a lot of information about what they need and how to effectively do it. So Game Changers for us is, again, a program where students are paid. That part is very important to me. And it goes, you go for anyone joining the program, you apply, you answer some questions, we have an interview to make sure it's a good fit, and then you are hired by RCC, and it runs from October to the end of May. Sometimes there's other opportunities that happen in summer, but that's kind of the official requirement for the cohort. We do stuff like invite folks from the community who are leaders or advocates to come speak to students. It's important for youth to be able to see themselves in leaders, and just from a more basic level, I think it's important to show students what jobs are out there, especially in a realm where they're gonna have skills that they're already building. We also do long-term projects with these students, which helps equip them with employability skills, long-term planning skills. And this year, I'm so proud of them. They helped us celebrate RCC's 50th anniversary with an incredible art show and rally celebrating 50 years, but also highlighting things that were important to them, like speaking to adults that are in leadership and power positions. And I'm just incredibly proud of the work they do. I have been with the agency for 6 years and have done that work since then. And each student is amazing. And the 4 that are here are just truly icons of that. So with that, I'm going to ask students to, one more just brief thing. I really appreciate Melinda mentioning it. We do a lot of work and have conversations around things like racism, transphobia, police violence, a lot of really big topics that have a lot of different capacity to kind of affect the way we're feeling. If we're feeling triggered, if we have personal experience with this, remember that can kind of manifest in the body in a lot of ways. We want you to care for yourself. And if that looks like muting us for a second, leaving the room, or even signing off, we totally understand. Just want to make sure we're aware that we talk very openly in Game Changers about these things. And if students bring it up, want everyone to be ready. So no more talking, Heather. Okay, students, take it away. Just doing our introduction now.
I can, sorry. Oh no, you go ahead. Okay. My name is Olivia Headley. I use she, her pronouns. I'm 18 years old and a senior at McFarland High School. This is my 3rd year as a Game Changer, and I can easily say it is the best choice I have ever made, especially on a whim. It was really great just to be able to meet people who really cared about social justice and didn't just want to talk about it on a surface level. It was really great to finally be able to have, so sorry, I said I would take my mask off when I was talking. There's COVID in my house, that's why. Yeah, it was really great just to meet people who could speak about social justice and different experiences beyond a surface level and beyond just what we hear in schools, because we know that's not enough. So it was just really great to have that space to feel safe. So best thing I ever did.
Yeah, I can go next. My name's Makeda. I ran for sergeant. I'm 17. I'm a junior at West High School. And I've been with Game Changers since my freshman year, so this is my 3rd year. I think one of my biggest takeaways from Game Changers, and one of my favorite things about it, is just getting to hear from a bunch of students who have a lot of different experiences than I do. especially relating to which schools we go to, because obviously, schools in an area like Madison are very different and have very different climates than schools that are a little farther out, like Oregon or McFarland. And it's really interesting and I think important to make sure that I'm getting a variety of perspectives on different issues, especially from people who have had different experiences with different administrations than I have.
I can go next. I'm Azalea. This is my third year for this program as well. And I'm a junior at West High School.
Hi, my name is Dimitri Naichu. My name, or you can also call me Trey. I use she/they pronouns. I identify as trans femme and two-spirited, Native American indigenous term for people that identify and perceive themselves to the world as both masculine and feminine. I'm more feminine though than masculine, so that's why I prefer to use the term trans femme. I am 18 years old. I go to Madison High School, and this is my second year as a game changer.
Thank you guys so much. For anyone watching or listening, if you see me snapping or saying like, yes, that's just because what I always do and because I think students are brilliant. So that's what's happening.
Thank you. And I do see we have a question in the Q&A, which is actually a question that we planned to cover. So I will get to that one. I kind of wanted to start a little bit more at the beginning. If anybody wanted to talk about how you became aware of Game Changers at your school, or what kind of prompted you to get involved. I know that one of you, I think it might have been you, Azalea, I'm not sure. One of you said you did it on a whim. So anybody wants to jump in with like kind of what brought you to wanting to apply?
That was me that kind of applied on a whim. I applied in the summer of 2020, so it was heavy. I will get it right next time with the mask. I applied in the summer of 2020, so it was heavy lockdowns and really heavy protesting as well after George Floyd was murdered. And I was finding a lot of like not super effective activism going on. I mean, to a degree, it's fine because protests may not always be accessible, but also there's a line, you know? So I saw on somebody's Instagram story an ad or a picture of the group with a link to the application. And I was so bored. I was like, this seems like something cool and I need something to do. So honestly, that's why I filled it out. And I had the interview and I was like, this is what I want to do. And it's been a really awesome 3 years. So yeah.
Want to respond to that a little bit. I think it was more than just being bored though. It's definitely like you were searching for a way to like, it sounds like, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but to kind of everything that was coming at you and all the lockdowns and everything we're hearing, like how can I navigate this in a way that feels right for me? So yeah. Anybody else want to mention how they came in?
Yeah, I can go next. So I think for me, it was also around 2020 that I applied. And a lot of it was just because I have always kind of been interested in social justice. And I think sometimes it can be hard, or at least at the time for me, it was hard to take that outside of just like personal interest. It was kind of hard to find groups, especially considering we were just going into the pandemic. And so I wasn't, it wasn't super easy to join clubs at school. And I didn't feel super engaged with those, especially with students who I hadn't really known. But I figured that this would be a good chance to meet people from all over besides just people I'd have access to at my school. And so I think my mom originally was the one who had passed the application information on to me because she knows that this is something that I'm really interested in. And then I joined and have been with it for 3 years as well.
I had kind of like an interesting way that I decided to apply, which was one of Heather's like work associates did a presentation at our school, and it was just like so informative, and it made the program really sound like super fascinating, and it kind of sold it as like an activism and like an educational opportunity. And so that was something that I really liked, and she just gave me I think Heather's email, and I like fired off an email to Heather and it was really exciting because we had the interview, and it was just like a really comfortable like setting, and I feel like it was like exactly what it was like labeled to me as.
For me, I was signed up, or not signed up, but like I found out about it through another game changer, a game changer's parent, who noticed me like wanting. I don't know how, but they're friends with my mom, and I don't know how that relationship works out. But she noticed that I have been doing a lot of advocacy work and thought that this would be a really great experience for me. And I'm glad that I decided to take it up.
Thank you for that. I'm curious, as you were talking about that, you learned about it, and I think Trey, you might have been the only one that learned about it from somebody else that was already connected to Game Changers. What have your friends or your peers kind of thought about it? Anybody that thinks it's really interesting and really exciting, and maybe you've been able to like kind of bring into it, or other people kind of wondering what you're doing? Any thoughts from your peers or your friends or parents?
I can, just to clarify, you're like kind of going after the second question, right? Okay.
I rephrased it, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. I don't get people that are negative about it, but it's more like people that just can't really add to the conversation. Like they'll say it's cool, but they don't proceed to show interest. It's kind of rare I find someone that's like, oh wow, that's so cool, tell me more, you know. But for the most part, it's neutral to positive from peers, and this includes adults. Yeah, I think it just depends on the person and who you're talking to. But the people that do know that I do this, they do like follow what we do.
Yeah, I'd say kind of a similar experience. I'd say typically not negative or anything, but I would say it's generally neutral to positive. I think a lot of it too is just that a lot of people, I think, are in support, especially in like an area like in an area like Madison, and then also in Madison schools. I think a lot of the people I know, and especially people I'm friends with, are definitely supportive of the work that we do. I think it's kind of can be. I mean, I think it's kind of a really unique experience. And so I think sometimes like telling people about it, they're just not really exactly sure what to make of it, because it's paid work, which I think is super awesome, because it's really important to make sure that young people are being shown that their work and their advocacy has value. But then it's also something that I think a lot of like my peers have not heard of, like this kind of job or like this kind of work being like receiving compensation for. So I think sometimes I think some of the neutral responses come from maybe some confusion or just surprise, because a lot of them haven't maybe had access to this kind of environment. They've had maybe some like discussions in classes about some of the topics on like a surface level, but they haven't gotten to have a chance to have like an experience like this. So I think sometimes people just aren't exactly sure what to make of it. And I think that speaks to the program's ability to fill in this really needed spot in a lot of youth lives.
I also think it's important to note that like some students we have like will talk to friends and they'll join. We've had students that refer, like I think we have maybe 3 or 4 students that came to us that way. So random, like, but thankfully I'm grateful that it sounds like kind of what Olivia said, like if someone's into it, they want to hear more about it, which is awesome.
Anybody else want to share on that question? Otherwise, I will move to the next one, which is actually not the next one on our sheet, but the one that was in the Q&A, because it relates to something Makeda just said.
Yeah, I can answer this real quick. I would say like everyone that's already spoken about this so far, like there hasn't been like any negative feedback. If anything, it's like from like friends and family, it's like, oh, that's cool. Then the conversation moves on. But like from the response from like the community specifically, I think they're like response that we're getting is like that they're amazed that we are 16, 17, 18-year-olds like doing this type of work that adults should be doing better, basically. But yeah, like it's just they're amazed about the work that we do. There's not really a better way else to put it.
It's amazing when you trust youth, the things that they will do.
Yeah, so the question that came up in the Q&A, and we were going to discuss it, but Makeda kind of mentioned something that made me think about it, was since you've been involved in this work and getting the opportunities that you've had, and like somebody had said before, being able to combine education and activism and get paid for it. And have you thought about whether do you think this maybe changed where you thought you might go towards in like future work or college or whatever, comes next for you after high school? Do you think it's influenced you as far as those career choices or volunteer work?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I was gonna say, thank you. I was gonna say, I think for me it has, because some of the exposure that we've gotten and like the interpersonal like work that we've ended up doing made me decide to get like a medical translation certificate when I was in high school. So I think that really helped me, and I think that the like toolkits and all the presentations that we've done within the group, like during those set months that Heather mentioned, um, those like really equipped me for like practices and seminars that I had to do for that. And I think it also helped me kind of like evaluate like what I valued and like what I thought like that I personally owed to people when it came to like jobs and like work that I wanted to lean towards. So I think it was really helpful because it helped me think about like different aspects for everything. And we usually have like an array of guest speakers that talk to us every single month, and they talk to us for like 1 or 2 hours. And they also provide lots of perspectives about like really important things like unions and like different fields of work and just like ways that things can tie into each other. So I think it really did for me. Like it really influenced like what I was like thinking about doing, like even just like during college and things like that.
For me, kind of different. It didn't necessarily change the path I wanted to go into, but it definitely did change how the way I'm going to critically think about it. So I'm a senior. I'm going to study health sciences and hope to get like a higher level degree and pursue some medical research. And if I end up taking higher level classes in medical, I will get this right, I swear. Oh my gosh. But like just knowing all of the education that Heather has given us that we don't get in schools about like systemic oppressions and intersectionality, it will be so much easier with this knowledge from GameChangers to be able to apply that to like if I'm conducting a study or if I'm like reading on a medical journal, will I be able to tell like, okay, how accurate is this information? Like, is this applicable to a number of communities and not just like cis white male body? So just knowing that I'm going to value so much more my education when I have this lens to think about like something as small as like DNA.
I'd say that working with GameChangers has somewhat shifted my perspective on like my future career goals. I've always been interested in like medical field, and kind of been building off of what Azalea said about some of our guest speakers. We've definitely had a few come in who have specifically talked about things that like work that they've done or work that they're pursuing that has kind of interested me in doing some of that work later in my life, and then also just the general advocacy work of GameChangers has kind of inspired me to take maybe more of like a social sciences lens as opposed to going through med school, which is based on like personal decisions as well. But I think knowing the work that I've done with GameChangers to really like think about the social systems and institutions has really tied in with the parts of science that I do love, and so I think it's definitely made that shift for me.
For me, I'd say that the skills that I've learned, like communication, team building, like being able to come together and work together. Cause like before this, like I was in this program, like I was always like the one that like always wanted to be solo in like a group project. But then like now like working like through this work, I'm realizing like that's not always like the best way to like do things, because you will only have one mind compared to think it's like 20-25 minds that we have working together at GameChangers. And the more people that you have like dedicated to work on something together, the more amazing effort and what you produce will be a lot better in the long run.
thank all of you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. It's not like it's a specific like career goal. Yes, I specifically want to get in this. It's all those ideas and how you'll apply those to what you're studying, what you're learning, just the way you're seeing things. And that's really interesting and really inspiring, and will serve whatever work you go into or your personal life it's going to be served well by those skills for sure. I'm kind of skipping again because one of the questions asked about things that were impactful and important, and I do believe you've answered a lot of that through your answers so far. But what has been maybe the hardest or most challenging part of working with Game Changers, or potentially like working with the content or the work that you're doing, even if it's not like being on the Game Changers team per se, but something that's been really challenging for you in your role?
I think something that I kind of struggle with is, going back and forth between like my school environment and Game Changers, because it's like in Game Changers, it's probably one of the first times that I've been in like a group with a bunch of people my age who are all like very passionate about social justice issues. And I've been in plenty of like school discussions where there's definitely several people who have been interested, but it's never going to be the full class, obviously. Like that's just not realistic. And I think that sometimes what can be hard with this is translating the work that we do and trying to find ways to like apply it to schools. Especially, I was a part of one of the groups that had done a workshop with administrators about how to handle sexual assault in schools. And so something that I kind of thought about a lot with this, especially because I also had, during that same year, I had a health teacher who attended that workshop, which is really cool. And he's been really supportive of RCC work and trying to incorporate that into the curriculum. And so it's kind of navigating the thing of like, I know this work is really important and I know it's clearly meaningful to the community and to the people I work with, but knowing like from the environments that I've experienced in schools, is it really going to be taken seriously? Are people going to receive this in the way that we want them to? And are they going to receive it in the way that they frankly need to in order to make better changes in our school environment? So I think sometimes like that can be kind of challenging to navigate, and I can get a little cynical about that. But it is always really nice to come back to Game Changers, knowing that I do have a group who is going to take it seriously in the way that they should. And I think that's really important to have that to balance out the negativity at times.
Goodness, I almost took up Heather's snapping, and I think I would have snapped my fingers right off on that response. Thank you, Makeda. That is true. And it just speaks to having a place to go to be reconnected to the importance of your work.
I want to go off of what Makeda said. I've just now realizing that I've had that exact same experience and just wasn't able to put the words to it. So thank you for saying that. Because what I had kind of thinking about for this question was purely just the social aspect of it. I'm incredibly shy and like almost like anxious about social situations in person. And this past year, I don't think I've ever sent as many emails or made as many phone calls or just talked with people like fake it till you make it that I've never met before. And knowing just what my next 4 years of college are going to look like and the field I'm going into, those skills are so important for me, even though I was like terrified to make a phone call to the RCC executive director because I'd like never made a phone call before. So it was hard, but in the end, it's been really good, like, along with everything that Makeda had said.
Anybody else want to speak to something that was challenging for them or surprising?
I guess that like the most challenging part for me is like topics that we talk about, like sexual assault, racism, like sexism, like those like issues that we see in like modern day society. Like we're not talking about like sunshine and rainbows over here, but like it's hard to like discuss it in like a way that like doesn't make it feel like entirely uncomfortable or it's not easy to like discuss these topics in a way that doesn't make it seem like entirely depressing. Like what we're working is like bring hope to like hopefully like do work and advocate and speak out about these topics. But like these topics can be really hard on us sometimes, like both mentally and emotionally.
something that I want to say is I think Game Changers is a diverse group. So kind of building off of what Trey said, like some of us are learning about this for the first time, and some of us have experienced this through lived experience for since we were born. So I think there probably is also challenge around kind of like some of us learning and some of us kind of validly saying like this has been my lived experience since I was young, and maybe this is the first time I'm getting language for it. But yes, I will also answer this question because it usually interests people. So the hardest part of my work, I do step into advocacy roles for students. So get things like disclosures and sharing experiences that are really, really sad and really difficult. Absolutely not the hardest part of my job. The hardest part of my job is watching adults, and I would say in my experience a lot of kind of adults involved in systems, so like healthcare systems or school systems, unfortunately not maybe listen to students but not take what they are really communicating about their needs seriously, either discrediting those ideas from youth because of age and saying things like, well, you don't have enough experience to know this. You don't know like how it works, so how can you make decisions? But students are willing to give us information about what they need. And what I see is adults failing to listen and then also take action to change and show accountability. So that's the hardest part of my job is bluntly seeing adults fail young folks over and over systemically. Try talking about depressing things, but I just want to be honest around like things that are hard working with youth in this capacity.
Okay, I just wanted to acknowledge we do have another question in the Q&A, but that is one of the questions that we will get to in a little bit. This question starts to get there and leans towards what Heather was just talking about. Like, what have you learned, speaking of systems, about like the Dane County school systems, either yours or other school systems? Like, what kind of things have you learned about those, seeing school as a system or trying to work with that system?
I think one thing that sticks out to me a lot is kind of understanding that, like, I think at a school like West, where, and I think like in a city like Madison in general, there's so many issues that we kind of pride ourselves on handling really well, and we pride ourselves on handling them the right way. That maybe we're really brushing under the rug a lot more than we realize, or we're just trying to separate ourselves from those issues to prevent them from coming up later. And I think that's something that's very true for Madison, but also for Madison schools and administration. I think on the surface, it does feel like my school handles things well, and we seem to have space for a diverse amount of clubs that talk about a variety of issues. There's spaces for students to meet, but I do feel like, you know, when it comes to student organized walkouts, I've definitely heard lots of testimony from students that they feel, you know, there's concern over whether they're going to be marked absent, whether their attendance is going to be affected. Like, there's not true like support from administrators about students pursuing social issues, and especially at a time like where everything is just so chaotic and turbulent right now in political and social systems. Instead of teachers really leaning back and giving, and not really teachers actually, I'd say a lot of it is administrators more than individual teachers, but instead of students being given full support from the administration, they're showing where the real focus and priorities lie, which is in making sure students are staying in classes, and that having good attendance is more important than pursuing these interests. And overall, besides interests and passions, you know, crucial work that needs to be done. And so I think that's really revealing of true colors, especially because often administrators pride themselves on having students back and supporting, you know, their causes. They want to be there. They want to mention these things in the announcements. But then when it comes down to it, when it comes down to like students leaving school in mass, it's typically not as encouraged as you would have thought it would be. And I think it's very telling. And it's not great at a school like Madison West. And I know from other students I've talked to who go to more schools in smaller areas, it's typically even worse there with less support from administration.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything Makeda said. I go to McFarland, which is very, very white, students and just community as a whole. And something like they always say, like, oh, we know every student's different, everyone has a unique experience. But I think after a while, it gets hard for some people, admin or teacher, hard to apply that and really realize that, like, okay, if this student doesn't fit the mold, then we might have to change our process for how we do things. And if that doesn't happen repetitively, like if teachers aren't paying attention to that or if staff isn't paying attention to that, eventually that student will fall through the cracks. And in a very white community, I think you can see where I'm going with this. I'm just blanking on the words right now, but it just, yeah, I'm sorry, I just totally blanked, but
What you said was totally coherent and great.
I guess like in the school community, like I've noticed like how normalized like the school culture is. Middleton is like somewhat diverse, but like I've started noticing that like stuff like joking about the topics that we discussed about like sexual abuse or like making fun of like people in minorities like have become like very normalized, and that's kind of upsetting to me, but I feel like the work that we're doing here is helping to dismantle that, to the best that we can. Yeah.
You know, I love that dismantle word. Thank you, Jay. Also, all these answers are so good. I'm so proud of y'all. Always impress me so much.
Okay, and kind of building off of that question, people that are either here listening live or will be listening to the recording, or that I'll be interacting with in my role at public health, are working in the community. Are they working community-based decisions or city and county departments, or they're city and county leaders, and they're making decisions about funding, policies, all sorts of things like that. What do you think they need to hear if you could like be sitting in the boardroom, sitting in the meeting, or like about what is needed and what maybe from your perspectives, what is needing or what is missing? Anything that you would think if you're sitting in the mayor's office or in the county exec, the budget meetings, or even smaller areas where people are making decisions about what programs to give space to and things like that, or where to put funding. What do you think they need to hear?
For me, this is a big one. I would push for education through and through and through. Just like take Florida, for example. It's terrifying what's going on down there. And I don't want to sound like fatalistic or hyperbolic, but I think it's entirely possible that we are going in a direction where representation is going to be like less and less and less and less really fast. So I think we need to fund and do anything we can while we have the freedom, unfortunately, to do so, before any and all representation is taken away. So whether that's something like a summer program for kids or like a book club that reads queer and POC and disabled authors, just anything like that, while I hate that I have to say this, but like, well, we still have that available to us. Fund education, summer school, anything.
And I think you're talking education specifically on like social issues and maybe like topics that we're not talking about as much in school because it's uncomfortable and takes an amount of experience to kind of navigate them well without like traumatizing people and such. Excellent, Olivia. Thank you. What else, y'all?
Kind of building off of that idea, I think not being afraid to make decisions that upset people and to not be afraid to make decisions that are, I guess, going to disrupt whatever has been traditionally upheld in whatever institution you're working in. I think so often there's issues. I don't know, this has kind of been like touched on a little bit, but especially with the issue of like education, there's so much backlash that's received from parents and all sorts of different groups about what should be taught, what can't be taught. And I think just making that decision and taking it upon yourself and with the people you work with to just make a call and not feel like you're having to give in to that pressure, because every time we wait and every time we we succeed on a decision, instead of just making it, we're hurting our youth, and we're hurting honestly all of us, all ages, every time we fail to make these decisions, as bold as they might be, and every time we wait to appease others, because we don't have that much time. Like exactly like Olivia said, we don't have time to wait around to do that. And I think it's just the most important thing you can do is to just act and get things through and pass, and encourage people around you to do the same, instead of waiting for a time when it feels comfortable and when it feels easy, because it's never going to be comfortable or easy. And the youth need you to do that, and the youth are trying as hard as they can to do that, but we need support in that area, especially.
Yes, Makeda. Yes.
Anyone else want to chime in there?
Anything else, y'all? This one's an important question to me.
I feel like Makeda just said it so perfectly. Like, I genuinely have no words. I feel like just everything she said, like, I think just like what Olivia said too, like, it's never too soon to be trying to advocate for decisions that you think are important, especially on a bigger scale too. I think people can sometimes like forget that. I know I do, but yeah, basically just everything everyone else said.
Yeah, and building off like what Azalea just said too, like there isn't like a better time to start advocating for now, while we still have that ability to advocate for like what we need and what we want to see, than maybe in like 10 or 20 years, when that may not necessarily be available in the same way as it was today.
I'm gonna put in my 2 cents here while anyone is listening.
I was just gonna offer.
Yes, I would say we need to put our money where our mouth is. We need to show students, not only with our attention, but with our funding and resources, that we are investing in them. I'm honest, from our youth aren't even our future. They are our present and everything that comes next. So paying students for their expertise, because it is expertise. And also being an adult that can take accountability, make apologies and reparations for things that maybe you've done wrong, and model that accountability is love and a natural part of being in an activist advocacy space. And then the last thing I would say is giving youth like all the information and space that we can. We're trying to equip young ones with tools, with even just like thoughts that are going to carry them, and in not only like things like employability skills, but also in things like self-care. How are we going to have longevity in careers that look like this? Those would be my top pieces of information. And sorry, last one, like if we're listening and asking for things from students, make sure you are prepared to do make big changes, and not only take accountability, but also what Makeda said, like do it now and don't make us wait, because we don't have time. So that's my impassioned plea. And I will also say, I can see that someone who's here, hi Dominic, that has invested in our work and supported us so much. And I really, really appreciate Dominic and like what his support is gonna, and his work's support is gonna do for our program. So just want to say there's some adults already doing that here. Thank you.
So along those lines, in the work that you've been doing, have you noticed things that aren't being funded or that are missing, or maybe you or other students or family or friend, like whomever is looking for and can't find when they're trying to find resources or support or advocacy or anything, that especially along the lines of the work you're doing?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So like I said, I go to McFarland Small School, but it has a surprising amount of clubs. A number of them are like social justice kind of social issue oriented as much as they can be in a school setting at least. And so I know there are a lot of resources there, but the one thing that I think, and this is from a personal standpoint too, the one thing I think in and outside of schools that could use some more funding or more support is kids, specifically students with disabilities. Like
Yes.
I have
Yes.
a lot of support is online, which makes sense for an accessibility reason. And I think support may be easier to come by like on a big university campus, but especially like with COVID in the mix now and just that being a part of our world, there's long COVID out there and that is debilitating. There's going to be a lot of students coming up in years that will need 504s and IEPs because of that. And that's really hard to deal with when your life takes a complete 180 in like 2 weeks. And school on top of that will be rough, speaking from experience. So I think whether it's done through like a therapist's office or like a support group situation, or even just like someone starting a club at school, that is the one thing I think I don't see a lot of.
Kind of building off of that, especially what you said about helping students with disabilities and providing more. I think we definitely need more resources in our schools for people with disabilities, especially because I noticed a lot of the Madison schools recently received a lot of grant money, and a lot of it's been going towards like athletic buildings and general like just remodeling of classrooms since the building is old. But I also do know that West is a school that has about 4 floors, about 4 floors. And there's only one elevator that's available for students, and it is off to the side in a way that is not convenient and easily accessible. It involves, crossing basically the entire school to maybe get up to a floor and maybe having to cross the entire school again. There's kind of one main ramp in the front of the school, but there's not a lot of, there's mostly the stairs at our school. There's not a lot of easy ramp access. And I just think in general, it's something that is often not at the forefront of people's minds in a way that it should be. And it's something that able-bodied people who are making a lot of the decisions about what this kind of money goes towards and what the money has gone towards in the past maybe haven't taken that into consideration. But for people who have to live and experience that kind of thing every day, it takes a lot out of your day when you have to cross the entire school and maybe take 4 or 5 extra minutes to get to a class and have to be late or have to miss time by leaving early for every class. It's just something that there's no reason that with the money we're receiving, and with a school with about 2,200 kids, that we aren't providing more accommodations, especially considering there's nothing outrageous or excessive about them. It's just providing basic care for people. So I think we really need to take that into consideration, kind of building off what Olivia said.
Really
Students-
appreciate that.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Really appreciate
No,
that answer, Makeda, and I made some notes about that, and I do really appreciate you calling that attention and also noting that that a lot of the people in decision-making spaces are able-bodied people, like it's not in their awareness and they're not thinking about it, except for potentially like compliance with ADA regulations or something. So I really appreciate you speaking that out, and I can take that to heart.
also from like an accessibility standpoint, physically very important. But I also want to note that in conversations and stuff like consent curriculum that we're asking folks to engage in, we need to make sure that we are meeting all students where they are. And that absolutely includes our disabled students, because unfortunately we know that disabled folks are especially vulnerable to sexual violence, sadly, similarly to many marginalized populations, and oftentimes are left out of these conversations, which makes it even more ridiculous because they're experiencing it at such a higher rate. So I think, yes, absolutely. And I've been like really like as someone with just that has some accommodation needs, being in Madison schools is really difficult for me, and I can climb stairs. So that part is extremely important. Also want to emphasize, like, we need to be building disabled students into our curriculums and not adding them as an afterthought, just because, yeah, the way I've seen disabled students treated, especially since the pandemic, is appalling. So what else, y'all? Sorry.
I want to add something to that really quick. I I'll be open and honest. Like, I have a 504 plan for my health condition, and I wound up really lucky with the person who is accommodating me for that. He was incredible, got me everything I needed, like no questions asked. However, I've heard horror stories from people in like Facebook groups saying like their school expelled them if they miss more than a certain amount of days of class. So anybody working, if anybody out there hears this, if you are a 504 case manager, do not put your students through that. Fight the school board, get them what they need, because graduating high school at this point is like, it's so essential. Like, and every student deserves to have that education. If they can't get that because the school board says no, because you miss a little more class than another kid, that's not okay. So if you know someone who's a 504 IEP, works in, I know special ed isn't the best term, but it's the only term I have for it, just fight them on this, please.
So we're getting close to time. I want to definitely offer anybody that's listening that wants to put something in the Q&A. I know, Dominic, you already have, and I hope we've answered your question, so I appreciate that. But we have a couple more that we can go over, but just putting that out there. If you have a question, please put it in there, and I will look to yours instead of instead of my own. So if I think this is actually it's similar but different, because it's not talking about people with disabilities, but the next question just asks about people, whether it's a system or people in leadership or power positions, how they could better support young people, or if you've learned anything about how they could better support young people who have been impacted by sexual violence. And are there areas where support and flexibility, and this is what made me think of Olivia's answer, to the structures there would be helpful, or pushing against the way things are set up? Have you encountered any of that with the work you're doing, that there's not the support or flexibility?
I would say that like the biggest thing, and like this has been said a lot, is that, or if like with students that are trying to advocate, is that we need to be listened to and not just heard, because there's a difference between listening to us and what we're saying than just hearing it going in one ear and out the other. Definitely, that's something I feel like people in leadership definitely need to do better on. And then also, if they say they're going to do something, to actually follow through on doing that, and not just saying, yes, we're going to do it, and then do something completely different than what they say they're going to do.
Also, y'all, some things that might be helpful to think about is, like, what were some of the stuff that was put in when you guys like presented to school administrators? What were some things that were important that could help survivors in any way? That was a great answer too. Just another way to think about it, if that helps at all.
I was going to say, I think this is going to be something that can be challenging, I think, for teachers and administrators, just because of like the lack of resources given to schools and lack of funding. So this obviously is not within everybody's capacity, but I think specifically with sexual assault, like bringing more emotion into your emotion and care into your response to someone who comes to you with that issue, because I think that sometimes so much of it can be seen as like too procedural and just kind of like going down a list. And even if the things that you're going down are technically like the right approaches to the issue, it can come off as very dismissive and just kind of like it's almost like it's just so like commonplace in this environment that, yep, oh, this happens all the time, let's just go down through these things. And you really want to make sure that you can do the best of your ability to make sure that student feels heard and they feel like you're someone that they can trust, and really just feel safe around, because it takes a lot of vulnerability to, put that, to trust somebody with that information. And so I think just making sure that, again, like I said, these are really difficult times. Schools teachers are already having to take on so many extra roles, and I want to acknowledge that as well. It can be hard. It's not in everyone's capacity to always come forward with the best fully fleshed out emotional response to something, but just trying as best as you can to encourage yourself when you can and others when they can, to really just make sure that they're hearing and, like Trey said, really listening to what students are saying, and then responding in a way that feels passionate and real instead of just, procedural, like you're following a script, like you're just trying to go down what you think you're supposed to do. And really just don't be afraid to like show your emotion when talking with a student, to show you care.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of answering the original question, for like physical support for people who have been impacted by sexual violence, there's a couple things I want to mention. First of all, like if you're an individual who's like helping somebody who's experienced sexual violence, the term I like to say is match the energy, meaning if they want to go all out and press charges, support them in that, do that. But if all they want is to just have you match them with the therapist and have it be done there, leave it. Don't do anything without their permission, because like that process can be incredibly traumatizing for somebody. And then on a more legal kind of standpoint, I guess is a good segue. I don't know all the jargon, but like for college campuses, especially where we know sexual assault rates are way high, there needs to be, if there isn't already, like suspension or expulsion policies for those who do commit it. And I know there's a lot of like workarounds with that. I know nothing about law, but something along those lines I feel like needs to be added, so there's a little more accountability than this is a bad thing for them to do. We're sorry this happened on campus. It's still a safe place. Yada, yada, yada.
Okay, we are almost out of time, but the important thing that we wanted to make sure that we got to, and that question kind of we kind of got some, so that's good, but was to make sure that we leave people with tools, and you all just spoke to some, and some of them take a lot of time and effort or money, and some of them really don't. It's just maybe like Makeda was speaking to, acknowledging that, remembering that. And as I worked in the criminal justice system with both people convicted of crimes and people who had been impacted by crimes, and always remembering that that person, I might have been working in that field for 10 years or 15 years, but for that person in that room, it's their experience, or their favorite, their person's experience, and always keeping that in the forefront. And that doesn't take any extra money to do that or anything. So I really appreciate you speaking that out. But anyway, besides that, and that tool I think is very important, and the other tools you've mentioned, are there any last tools that you would like to leave us with to think about as we go through our work?
Even just y'all, like what are some like phrases that are helpful to have like in our back pocket to respond, that maybe young folks especially need to hear?
My personal favorite, nothing about us without us. I'm blanking on who coined it, but I believe it was a disability activist.
Yes.
Love that one. Since I heard it, like, perfect.
Love it. What else, y'all?
I was gonna say kind of like, I guess it's sort of like a tool, sort of a, I don't know, advice
Yes,
tool-ish,
perfect.
but like not being afraid to admit when you don't know something or you're not familiar with something, especially as, I guess as we all know, like times are always changing. There's always new phrases, new, practices, new, just anything to be more inclusive that, we develop over time. And I'm sure that can definitely feel like alienating, especially like adults working with youth to a degree, where it feels like things are moving on without them. But instead of like letting that be something that feels discouraging, like know that youth want to work with you in the best way that they can and the best way that works for you. And so not being afraid if you're not familiar with something, or if you feel like you made a mistake, you used the wrong language, you did the wrong thing, just not being afraid to admit that you don't know that, and to not be afraid to make those mistakes, because you'll end up causing more harm if you just use your fear of that to not get involved with youth work, and you get afraid to not take that next step. And just understand that most youth hopefully will want to just meet you where you're at, because the more support we can get, the better. We're all obviously in this together. So just not being afraid to take that step and to admit that maybe you don't know something. And that's totally fine, because plenty of youth are still learning this kind of stuff every day as well.
And going off of what Makeda said as well, it also shows accountability, and it shows that you are really really care and that you are trying your best to do something about it.
Just a few other things I would add for working with youth that I found. If you are someone that is a mandated reporter, make sure to communicate that, even if you have inklings that someone might disclose. We know, as Olivia mentioned, that forcing someone as someone under 18, if they do disclose and are mandated reporters, takes away someone's autonomy again, which can feel like re-victimization and a lot of other really unpleasant things. We want to equip youth with as much info as we can. So if it's something that you're interested in finding language for, you can contact me or Melinda and we can follow up more with that. But making sure your young person knows that. And then also, even if you don't know, give them as much information as you can. Like, what would a court process look like? Saying, I don't know, but I will get that answer to you. Checking in consistently, even if the answer is, I'm so sorry, I don't have any new answers for you. I'm going to check in with you and check in with someone else and get back to you. Just being responsive and like on top of it. And those are just things I wanted to add. Sorry.
Okay. Anyone else before we start to like wrap things up? Unfortunately, since the chat is not available, I cannot put a survey in the chat, but that's okay because I'll send it out with the recording, and I'll send it out to the registrants that maybe registered and then their evening got away from them and they were unable to join live. Then they can listen to the recording and then listen and then respond on the survey as well. So I will be getting that out in the next day or two. I just wanted to highlight what Dominic put in the Q&A because I think it's a good summary. Or summation. He said, oh, it went away. I don't know. He said he was literally.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's because I answered it.
Oh. He said
so
he was
silly. I do
screaming
not.
and snapping during the entire presentation, and it was a masterclass in leadership through youth and the youth voice and advocacy. So I just wanted to give you all that shout out in case you hadn't peeked down there and opened the Q&A. And again, Dominic is someone from what I know, it worked with the library system and is now at City of Madison Community Development Division. So in an excellent position to be hearing this, and glad he gave you those shout outs. I'm going to walk away with some of these quotes that youth need to be listened to and not just heard. I really liked that. And I really liked nothing about us without us. Both of those are like, you really be thinking about them and really think that before you're doing things. And being true to those things. I really appreciate that. So those are a couple of my takeaways, in addition to really thinking more about how to better support persons with disabilities. So I really appreciate all of those things. And I know other people listening or will be watching the recording will have many other takeaways. I wanted to thank all of you again for being willing to spend time here and share your knowledge. As Dominic said, it was like a masterclass. I was thinking that through it too, like, you all are basically providing so much information and to us in this space and just off the top of your heads. So that's amazing to me. So thank you.
Y'all, so proud of you. You always impress me. Thank you for being vulnerable and direct. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Anything else? Or I'm going to hit the end webinar button and that will stop the recording. Okay. Thank you and have a good evening.